involved in any way with the Jewish agency?
Except, not except for the fact that when Dobkin was there, I arranged Israel Goldstein's trip through the camps.
Did you ever see the Jewish Brigade? Did they
No,
contact you?
They had never contacted me. They was too late for that. I was too late for that. They were active earlier in the period of 44 and 45, the early 45.
What about UNRWA? What were your? Did you have any activity with
No, none whatsoever.
Where did you ever have any difficulties in smoothing the relations between the DPs and the army?
No, I never had any difficulties, and the army knew. I'm sure that they knew that I was always busy with Jews rather than with Jewish soldiers.
Yeah, well, no, I'm asking a different question. I'm asking whether there was you encountered any difficulties with the
Quite the
DPs and the
contrary.
army. The army and the DPs got
the
along
army
well.
always helped us.
But there was never any conflict between the DP
No,
and the army.
never. Not to my knowledge. Quite the contrary. I had a feeling that the army was looking over my shoulder all the time and approving everything I was doing. And in those months in Frankfurt and in Berlin, as well as in Marseille, my chief preoccupation was with Jewish DPs, who were the first ones out of the camps I saw in Marseille and later in Frankfurt and then in Berlin.
What were the type of questions that these DPs wanted you to answer for them?
Food.
Food. What about family? Were they concerned about their families?
At that time, no. In fact, it surprised me when I found these differences among the DPs themselves. As early as in Marseille, I had noticed the two kinds, as I described to you. The women that were well-fed and appeared to be well-clothed, and the others who were just the opposite.
Now,
in fact,
yeah.
I brought them, I remember once in the restaurant when they were being given a meal, I brought them all candies, bags of candies, of sweets, which was very rare at the time, and they would fight for it. And it surprised me that grown women would fight for a little bag of candy, but they did, claiming that they were entitled to it more than the others. On the other hand, I began to understand them better, and I sympathized with both sides because they both had problems. Subsequently, in the later years, I met a lot of DPs that came out of the camps in Israel, and I judged them more generously than I did earlier.
Is there anything else about the work within the camps, or you actually didn't work in a camp?
No.
No.
I was stationed in Frankfurt and in Berlin.
Were there any other illegal activities that you were involved in during this period of time?
Except for the fact that in some case or other I facilitate the movement of some individual or some individuals.
Well, how did that come about?
They would come to me.
Yeah.
For help.
Do you remember any specific cases?
I wanted to talk about it. In fact,
you don't want to talk about it?
It began in Marseille with those. There were some who didn't want to go to Palestine, who wanted to go elsewhere, who wanted to remain in France, for example. I remember one photographer in particular who wanted to remain in France and came to me for help. And I refused all the help. I was willing to give help to a group rather than to meet the needs of any individual. This was the problem we all had to face, whether to confine ourselves to the cases of the individual salvation of a person, or of a group. And in the main, I discovered that all other chaplains I talked to opted for the group help. We weren't excited about individual cases. After a while, I could hear stories by the dozens about this man's hardships or this woman's special hardship, and I just soon learned that they were common to all people, and that anything we could do to facilitate the help to a group of refugees was more important than to involve ourselves in a single case. This is the only difference we had with inmates from the camps. Some of them expected special treatment, or they had an uncle or an aunt in New York or Philadelphia or somewhere, and they wanted us to get a visa for them to visit. Who could find time for that?
Yeah. So most of the time that you spent was really with DPs or these Jews who had come out of hiding.
Yeah.
Most of your chaplaincy was involved with that.
DPs in Marseille, Nice, and Cannes, and DPs in Frankfurt, and people who were in hiding come out from hiding in Berlin.
Now, were you involved in any activity of sending guns across Europe to Palestine?
No, none of that business.
Do you know anybody who was involved in that?
I don't know. I was asked once or twice, I don't know, to get involved in it, and this I refused to do.
Why?
Because it would destroy my usefulness in other directions.
For example?
If I were to do it in Frankfurt, the Army would put restrictions upon me. They couldn't overlook that, you see. And I wanted to be free, for example, to visit our Jews in this hotel anytime I wanted to. And there were several hundred there. And there are times when I got them money, cash from either boys or officers in the Army, and times when I brought them food. And for that reason, and the same situation developed in Berlin. In Berlin, I had visits from Russian soldiers, Russian officers who came to see me in my office, who appeared to be concerned with their Jewishness, and they were always suspect to me. I didn't trust them. I would meet them pleasantly.
But were there any American Jewish chaplains that came to you and said, we would like you to participate in sending the guns across Europe?
No.
Who came to you?
No. The only Jewish chaplains I met was originally in Belgium, when we were moved from England to Belgium, from where we received assignments.
And who took your place when you left, and when did you leave?
Shuba. I left because in 45, right after Yom Kippur, my wife was in the hospital with double pneumonia, and the Red Cross wired me. And as a result, I guess I got my discharge a year sooner than I would have. I came back here and I received orders later to be discharged from Camp Meade over here in 46, and I think it's in February of 46. I came back right after Yom Kippur.
Fine. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we conclude? Okay.
I don't know, except for the fact that my general feeling was that the Jewish chaplains in the Army, wherever they were, performed magnificently, and they did move without the Army regulations to help Jews wherever they were. Our first concern wasn't with services or with the problems of GIs. That was secondary. Our first concern was with Jews who were footloose in Europe, and this I discovered when I talked to any other chaplain. It was the same story.
Okay.
I finally bumped into a man some years ago. I lived on the other side of the town. I took my work into a tailor, and he asked him to do a good job, and he said, "Ich bin a Schneider von daheim." So I asked him, "Where do you come from?" It turned out he was one of the people I had helped in Frankfurt. He'd gotten here independently.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.